Microphone, please.
Yeah, thank you. I have no answer for that excellent question. In fact, I struggled with it myself as I tried to prepare for this talk today, because all of the research I've found has been fairly academic, high-level theoretical, and very little empirical data out there. So I can tell you what I did to think about this question, which again, I really do thank WIPO, Global Congress, for coordinating and getting us to focus on here today and all together. I think what's needed is a little bit of a shift in emphasis to really think about this issue from one of arguably a punitive enforcement perspective to something more along the lines of really the spirit of IP in itself, how it works, which is that it is itself a constructive incentive structure. It rewards innovation. So what I did was, in my very little spare time at the foundation, was I reviewed all of the projects I could, spoke with a number of program officers to try to understand what are the discrete critical elements for a thriving IP infrastructure. We've heard a number of the panelists today speaking about that, what creates that business environment, and try to research any evidence of that appearing. As I referenced in my opening that there are a number of projects where we're seeing fully African-led, sophisticated research projects where there is absolutely innovative research going on. This needs to be recognized. That particular program is Tanzania, but it's a 7-nation project, all African-led, to evaluate data around cassava disease and to create a diagnostic plan. There are a number of these projects, and I think that this is the way I'm starting, anyway, to look at this, is to recognize where there are opportunities that should be fostered. Another great project, innovative promise in the developing world is AWARD, African Women for Agriculture and Research and Development. It's an excellent project where now we've got over 350 fellows who have been granted fellowships to be mentored because of the promise they've shown in research and development and innovation. I think we just need to start looking at the real projects and the real incentives and the real evidence, frankly, of innovation that is going on. It's hard to find, but somehow we should all start talking more about that. I'm sure we can start learning from that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Perhaps I know the moderator shouldn't speak too much. I tried to restrain myself just to say one word. The question which you've raised is keeping the Advisory Committee for Enforcement, it's still called Enforcement, at WIPO quite busy. So we have started in 2009 on the basis of a fairly seminal study of our now chief economist, then he was Professor Carsten Fink, on the issues of how to measure the effect of counterfeiting and piracy on individual economies. And that really has the basis now for ongoing discussion among member states, but also among NGOs and IGOs and experts whom we invited also to participate with studies in the last session of the Congress, which took place in December of last year. Next session will take place in December of this year. We are already working on assigning studies and further research papers. So it is an ongoing research project, and if you want further information, it's on our website, www.wipo.int. Further comments? Well, then I would invite, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Primero que todo me voy a presentar. Soy el subprefecto Juan Carlos Fuentes Sandoval de la Policía de Investigaciones de Chile, jefe de la Brigada de Delito de Propiedad Intelectual. Desde el punto de vista de mi experiencia en el área operativa, primero que todo quiero darle el agradecimiento públicamente a la OMPI por la donación de un programa I2 que nos va a permitir en Chile analizar de mejor forma la información para la búsqueda y la detección de delitos de propiedad intelectual. No obstante ello, mañana, tengo entendido, habrá una presentación de un representante del gobierno de mi país, pero esta unidad, desde su creación, 3 años a la fecha, ha tenido éxitos que son demostrables, tangibles, con incautaciones este año, el año recién pasado, de 9,5 millones de dólares y más de 1.400.000 especies incautadas. Entonces, mi afán hoy día es agradecer la oportunidad y también hacer un comentario y reflexión que cuando se trabaja bien, en forma coordinada, en forma honesta, muy transparente, debe lograrse un éxito. Y este éxito policial que yo comento acarrea también algunas dificultades y desde este ámbito se necesita la permanente colaboración, porque cuando son grandes volúmenes de incautaciones, hay que pensar en un bodegaje, en el cuidado de la mercadería que llegue a la destrucción y no se desvíe nada de esa incautación. Es decir, tiene que haber una transparencia, una corrección y una honestidad en los procedimientos. Cuando se genera ese vínculo con los diferentes actores, hay confianza, y eso es lo que hoy día se ha recalcado durante toda la jornada, es la permanente colaboración. Muchas gracias.
Thank you for this comment on the difficulties and the costs of enforcement systems and the need for effective also international cooperation among the various stakeholders. Do you want to comment on that? Perhaps Tom, from private sector perspective, also on how the private sector and private companies can participate, perhaps also in facilitating the application of enforcement measures through developing countries. This is something which also the Deputy Minister from Zambia had raised.
As I mentioned earlier, private sector companies have been obviously very active in addressing enforcement-related matters in many different industry sectors. I think with respect to healthcare and pharmaceuticals and so forth, I think there's certainly evidence to show that there are several companies have been very active in working along with governments and enforcement entities to address counterfeit issues, and particularly counterfeit issues as they impact the developing world. You know, with respect to working with enforcement authorities in various other developing nations and other areas, you know, clearly there's been a lot of work done already by many of the people in this audience and other parts of the world to be able to, you know, build and develop relationships with enforcement authorities, government, to be able to find ways to better identify and stop counterfeits coming at the border or in the marketplace. You know, clearly more can be done. I think we've made tremendous progress from where we were 10 years ago on these matters. Much like our colleague over here who's speaking on healthcare issues, probably more can be done. In terms of the research question that was posed, it's a difficult question because there's not a whole lot of it available. Certainly there's some evidence, quite a bit of evidence to look at product counterfeiting with respect to pharmaceuticals that's out there, and that's certainly been gathered. But more needs to be done to be able to evaluate what the impact of all this is. Look, I think industry is interested in these things because at the end of the day, these types of problems affect industry as well. Industry has no vested interest in seeing the marketplaces they're working in to have the presence of counterfeit goods. And it doesn't help the bottom line. And it certainly doesn't help in building and developing a business in any part of the world, whether it's in the developed world or the developing world. And the hope would be is that process will in the process of better cooperation between the private sector and government and other stakeholders will continue.
Thank you, Tom. I understand. Yes? I understand we're getting slowly to the end of our time, but I certainly also want to first give Mr. Sibanda an opportunity to react, and that I know that there is one more request for the floor. I think, given the fact that Minister Besson will not be speaking, we may have like 5 or so more minutes to use. Please, Mr. Sibanda.
Yes, well, I'm just reacting to the request made by the Honorable Minister from Zambia, and just to let her know that the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization is more than willing to support Zambia, that is in organizing maybe a workshop now that the IP laws are in place, and would be willing to send some people there and maybe sponsor some people from different parts of Zambia for a workshop to look into the newly enacted laws.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. That's a very practical approach to this discussion. There was a request for the floor up there.
My name is Jim Barnes with Caterpillar, and I just wanted to reflect on some of the comments that we heard today. When I read the agenda for today's discussion, I felt that there may be an implication that there were some arguments for weakening IP protection in developing countries, and that would be debated at some level. But after hearing the comments from the participants, there seems to be a pretty consistent perspective that strong IP protection not only encourages strong businesses to come into developing countries, but also encourages local development of competing businesses and competing technologies. So just wanted to mention at a high level that strong brand protection and strong trademark protection in developing countries encourages global companies to go into those regions with a predictable plan for brand management. The strong trade secret protection, which can be improved in various regions, really helps companies move into those regions with the best business models that they've developed outside of the region. And strong protection for patents and predictable harmonized protection for patents in developing countries also encourages global companies to bring R&D activities and to build up supply bases in developing countries, which I think helps maintain or create sustainable economies in those regions. And then finally, all of these protections combined with efforts to harmonize developed countries' IP regimes with other countries' IP regimes helps those local businesses which have been nurtured and created locally compete globally. So some of the things moving forward that private companies can do would be to maintain their relationships with the government bodies, which we've heard a lot about today,